When a weathered widower discovers a high society bride abandoned in the winter woods, still wearing her wedding dress, he makes a choice that defies all social conventions of 1885. Why would a simple farmer kneel before a stranger's broken dreams? And what secrets lie behind her cruel abandonment? The wooden cart will hit a frozen rut, jolting Elias Grove from his thoughts. His breath made ghostly clouds in the bitter November air as he steadied the reins with hands that knew more about plowing fields than gentle comfort these days. 2 years since Martha died, and the forest path still felt emptier than his heart. Snowflakes landed on his thick wool coat, melting slowly like memories that refused to fade. The horse, old Samuel, plodded forward with ears flat against the wind. They'd been to town for supplies, flour, salt, and coffee beans that would last through the coming storm. Winter in Minnesota territory showed no mercy to the unprepared. Something white flickered between the dark tree trunks ahead. Not snow too large, too still. Elias squinted through the gathering dusk, his weathered face creasing with confusion. As the cart drew closer, his heart stuttered. A woman sat propped against an ancient oak, her wedding dress spreading around her like spilled milk on dark earth. Torn lace veil tangled with dead leaves in her honey-colored hair. Her face, round and pale as winter moon, tilted downward. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge the approaching cart. "Whoa, Samuel." Elias pulled the reins, wheels crunching to a stop. The woods held their breath, silent except for distant crows arguing over territory. The woman's shoulders shook. Crying, he realized. Her fancy white gloves, now stained with dirt and tears, clutched a leather traveling case to her chest like it might fly away. Elias climbed down, his boots breaking through the thin ice crust on puddles. Each step closer revealed more details. The expensive fabric of her dress, now ruined by mud. The delicate pearl buttons running down her back. The way her breath came in ragged gasps that spoke of hours spent weeping. "Ma'am." His voice came out rougher than intended, unused to speaking gently these days. She startled violently, blue eyes flying open. Terror flashed across her features before resignation settled in. "Please," she whispered. "If you mean to rob me, there's nothing left to take." Elias stopped, raising his hands slowly. "I'm no thief, ma'am. Name's Elias Grove. I farm about 3 miles west of here." He gestured to his cart, laden with supplies. "What brings a bride to these woods alone?" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving tracks through the dirt on her face. "I'm not a bride," she choked out. "Not anymore." The wind picked up, sending dead leaves skittering across the forest floor. Elias noticed her lips had turned blue, her whole body trembling. Whether from cold or distress, he couldn't tell. "You'll freeze out here," he said, unbuttoning his heavy coat. "Whatever happened, it can't be worth dying for. Can't it?" Her laugh held no humor, only bitterness sharp as winter frost. "My intended took one look at me stepping off the train and declared me too substantial for his tastes. Left me at the crossroads with nothing but this case and my shame." Anger flared in Elias's chest, hot and sudden. He hadn't felt such fury since watching helplessly as fever took Martha. What kind of man abandoned his bride in the wilderness? Without thinking, he shrugged off his coat and knelt before her in the frozen leaves. The cold bit through his flannel shirt immediately, but he ignored it. Up close, he could see the delicate embroidery on her dress, the careful stitches that spoke of hope and dreams now shattered. "Miss Whitmore, Amelia Whitmore." Her voice barely rose above the wind. "Miss Whitmore, I can't pretend to know your pain, but I do know about being left behind." He held out his coat. "Please, let me help you." She stared at his offered coat, then at his face, searching for deception. Finding none, her shoulders sagged. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "Because once, someone helped my Martha when she needed it most. She always said kindness comes back around." He draped the coat over her shoulders, noticing how she flinched at the unfamiliar touch. "And because no decent person would leave you here to die." The coat engulfed her, still warm from his body. She pulled it tighter, breathing in the scents of tobacco, hay, and honest work. So different from Nathaniel's cologne and promises. "I sold everything," she whispered. "My parents' house in Philadelphia, my mother's jewelry. All to come here and marry a man I'd only known through letters." Fresh sobs racked her body. "I'm such a fool." Elias settled back on his heels, giving her space while staying close enough to catch her if she fainted. "The only fool is the man who couldn't see past appearances to the person beneath." Thunder rumbled in the distance, promising the storm would arrive sooner than expected. Elias glanced at the darkening sky, then back at Amelia. Her wedding dress offered no protection against the coming weather, and her thin shoes were already soaked through. "Miss Whitmore, I need to ask something of you." He kept his voice gentle but firm. "Will you trust me enough to get you somewhere warm and safe? My farm isn't fancy, but it has walls and a roof. You can decide what to do next once you're not in danger of freezing." She studied him with eyes that had seen too much disappointment for one day. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing." The answer came instantly, surprising even him. "Just the knowledge that I didn't leave someone to suffer when I could help." Lightning flashed, illuminating her tear-stained face. In that moment, Elias saw not just a jilted bride but a woman of courage who'd risked everything for love, only to have it thrown back in her face. His heart, frozen since Martha's death, cracked just slightly. Amelia struggled to stand, her legs stiff from cold and sitting too long. The elaborate dress tangled around her feet, heavy with mud and melted snow. Elias offered his hand, rough and calloused against her soft palm as he helped her up. As they approached the cart, Samuel snorted and stamped, eager to be moving. Elias helped Amelia climb onto the bench seat, then retrieved her traveling case. The leather was scuffed, one brass clasp broken, evidence of rough handling. "Everything I own is in that case," she said quietly as he secured it in the cart bed. Elias climbed up beside her, taking the reins. "Then we'll guard it carefully." He clicked his tongue, and Samuel leaned into the harness. The cart lurched forward, wheels finding the same ruts that had brought them here. Amelia swayed with the motion, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Without asking, Elias shifted closer, offering his shoulder for support. After a moment's hesitation, she leaned against him. They traveled in silence, broken only by creaking wheels and Samuel's steady hoofbeats. The forest grew darker, shadows reaching across their path like grasping fingers. An owl hooted somewhere above, hunting for its evening meal. Amelia's breathing slowed, exhaustion finally overwhelming her pride. Her head drooped against Elias's shoulder, damp hair tickling his neck. He adjusted his hold on the reins, careful not to disturb her rest. As the first fat raindrops began to fall, Elias urged Samuel to a faster pace. The storm was coming, but they'd reach shelter in time. For the first time in 2 years, he felt a stirring of purpose beyond mere survival. The woman beside him shifted, murmuring something in her sleep. Elias couldn't make out the words, but the tone spoke of sorrow deep enough to drown in. He knew that feeling well. "Don't worry, Miss Whitmore," he said softly, though she couldn't hear. "You're safe now." Thunder cracked overhead as if challenging his promise, but Elias Grove had faced worse storms. Both the kind that fell from the sky and the kind that fell upon the heart. What he didn't know was that this chance encounter would change everything, for both of them. But first, they had to survive the night ahead. Mud sucked at the wagon wheels as rain hammered the canvas cover Elias had hastily thrown over Amelia. She'd woken with a start when thunder exploded directly overhead, nearly falling from the bench before his arm steadied her. "Easy there," he called over the storm's roar. "We're almost home." Home. The words stuck in her throat like unshed tears. Her home was gone, sold to fund this disaster of a journey. Through gaps in the canvas, she glimpsed a small cabin materializing through sheets of rain, its windows dark as empty eye sockets. Samuel struggled up the final hill, hooves slipping in the muck. The horse whinnied in relief as they reached level ground, knowing dry hay and shelter waited nearby. "Stay here while I open the barn," Elias shouted, jumping down into ankle-deep mud. He disappeared into the storm, leaving Amelia alone with her thundering heartbeat. This was madness. She'd climbed into a stranger's cart, let him take her to his isolated farm. Her mother's warnings about trusting strange men echoed in her mind, competing with the memory of Nathaniel's cruel words at the station. "Too much woman for my modest home," he'd sneered, looking her up and down like spoiled meat. The photograph showed someone lighter. The barn door creaked open, lantern light spilling across the muddy yard. Elias emerged, soaked to the skin but moving with purpose. He led Samuel into the shelter, cart and all, then helped Amelia down from her perch. "Watch your step," he warned, guiding her around the worst puddles. Ground slick as soap. Inside the barn, warmth radiated from the animals. 2 milk cows, a handful of chickens roosting in the rafters, and a gray cat that watched them with suspicious yellow eyes. The air smelled of hay, manure, and safety. Elias unhitched Samuel with practiced movements, rubbing the horse down despite water streaming from his own clothes. Amelia stood awkwardly, her ruined wedding dress dripping onto the packed earth floor. "There's a trunk in the loft," he said without looking at her. "Martha's clothes. Take what you need." Martha, his wife, presumably dead, from the way he spoke of her. Amelia climbed the ladder carefully, her wet skirts threatening to tangle with each rung. The loft held neat stacks of quilts, a rocking chair draped with a shawl, and a cedar trunk carved with flowers. Opening it felt like disturbing a grave, but necessity outweighed propriety. Inside lay simple dresses, carefully folded nightgowns, and woolen stockings. Everything smelled of lavender and loss. She chose a blue calico dress, modest but well-made, and changed behind a hanging quilt. The dress fit surprisingly well. Martha must have been built similarly to herself. Not thin like a fashion plate, but sturdy, real. When she descended, Elias had finished with Samuel and stood waiting, holding her traveling case. His eyes flickered over Martha's dress but showed no pain, only quiet acceptance. "Ready to brave the rain again?" he asked. "It's a short dash to the house." They ran through the downpour, Elias slightly ahead to guide the way. The cabin door stuck, swollen with protesting, before yielding to his shoulder. Inside, darkness greeted them until he lit a lamp, revealing a single room with a loft above. Everything spoke of a life interrupted. A half-finished quilt draped over a chair, dried flowers in a vase on the table, a woman's apron hanging by the stove. Dust-coated surfaces like gray snow, undisturbed for months. "I'll start a fire," Elias said, kneeling by the cold hearth. "You should sit, rest." Amelia perched on the edge of a wooden chair, watching him work. His hands moved with careful efficiency, building a structure of kindling and logs. When flames finally caught, their light painted his face in gold and shadow. "Are you hungry?" He didn't wait for an answer, moving to the kitchen area. "I've got venison stew from yesterday, and bread that's only a little stale." Her stomach growled loudly enough to hear over the rain. When had she last eaten? Breakfast on the train seemed a lifetime ago. Soon, the cabin filled with the scent of warming stew. Elias set a bowl before her, along with thick slices of bread and butter. He took his own meal standing by the window watching the storm. "Why did you really help me?" The question escaped before Amelia could stop it. He turned, considering. "Martha used to say the world's got enough hardness without folks adding to it. He paused, swallowing. She was always taking in strays. Cats, dogs, even a baby raccoon once. Said every living thing deserved a chance. I'm not a stray animal." "No, you're not." His eyes met hers, steady and serious. "You're a woman who took a brave chance on happiness and got your heart broken for it. That's worse than being a stray." Tears threatened again, but Amelia forced them back. She'd cried enough for one day. Instead, she focused on the stew, rich with herbs she couldn't name but that tasted like comfort itself. Thunder rattled the windows as they ate in silence. When Amelia finished, exhaustion hit her like a physical weight. Her eyelids drooped despite her best efforts. "Loft's yours tonight," Elias said, gathering their dishes. Clean sheets on the bed, And there's a wash basin up there. I'll sleep down here by the fire. She climbed the ladder again, each step an effort. The loft held a proper bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a small window that showed nothing but rain-streaked darkness. A nightgown lay folded on the pillow, another of Martha's things, smelling of cedar and thyme. After washing her face and changing, Amelia crawled between sheets that felt stiff from disuse. Below, she heard Elias moving about, banking the fire, settling into what sounded like a makeshift bed on the floor. "Elias?" she called softly. "Yes. Thank you. For everything." A long pause. "You're welcome, Miss Whitmore. Sleep well." But sleep wouldn't come. Amelia lay listening to the storm, to the unfamiliar creaks of the cabin, to her own thoughts spinning like wagon wheels in mud. What would tomorrow bring? Where could she go with no money, no family, no prospects? Sometime near midnight, she heard Elias stirring below. Peering over the loft's edge, she saw him sitting by the dying fire, a small object cradled in his hands. Moonlight through a break in the clouds revealed it as a silver locket. He opened it with reverent care, gazing at whatever image it held. His shoulders shook once, a single silent sob, before he snapped it shut and returned to his blankets. Amelia retreated to her borrowed bed, understanding settling over her like another quilt. They were both broken, both carrying grief too heavy for one person. Maybe that's why fate had crossed their paths in that frozen forest. Morning came gray and wet, the storm reduced to steady drizzle. Amelia woke to the sound of someone whistling, a cheerful tune that seemed impossible after yesterday's events. Descending the ladder, she found Elias cooking breakfast, the cabin transformed by daylight. He'd opened curtains she hadn't noticed, revealing windows that looked out on rolling fields and distant woods. The room felt lived in now rather than abandoned. "Coffee?" He offered a steaming mug without turning from the stove. "It's strong enough to stand a spoon in, but it'll wake you up." She accepted gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough." He slid eggs onto 2 plates, added thick slices of ham, and set one before her. "Eat up. We need to talk about what happens next." The eggs were perfect, the ham smoky and rich. Amelia ate with more appetite than she'd expected, aware of Elias watching her thoughtfully. "I can't pay you," she said finally. "For room and board, I mean. Everything I had went into the journey here. Didn't ask for payment." He sipped his coffee, steam curling around his weathered face. "But winter's coming, and you can't exactly walk to town in this weather." "I could work." The words tumbled out desperately. "I can cook, clean, so. I know how to keep books. My father owned a dry goods store before he died. I could. Miss Whitmore." He held up a hand, stopping her flood of words. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. No payment required." She stared at him, searching for the catch. Men didn't offer charity without expecting something in return. "Why?" Elias set down his mug, meeting her gaze squarely. "Because yesterday, you reminded me that my heart's not as dead as I thought. That's payment enough." Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Elias frowned, moving to the window. "That's Ben Turner's horse. Something must be wrong." He grabbed his coat and hat, stepping onto the porch as a rider approached through the drizzle. Amelia watched from the doorway as the men talked, their voices too low to hear clearly. When Elias returned, his face was grim. "Turner's cow is birthing wrong. He needs help, and his wife's alone with 3 young ones." He hesitated. "I have to go." "But, go," Amelia said firmly. "I'll be fine here." He studied her face, then nodded. "There's a rifle above the mantel if you need it. Don't open the door to strangers." A pause. "Though I suppose I was a stranger yesterday." After he left, silence filled the cabin. Amelia stood in the middle of the room, suddenly aware of being alone in a strange man's house, wearing his dead wife's clothes, with nowhere else to go. But instead of fear, she felt something unexpected. Possibility. The cabin needed cleaning, the floors wanted scrubbing, and those windows hadn't seen a proper washing in months. Rolling up her sleeves, Amelia Whitmore began to make herself useful. After all, if she was going to impose on this kind stranger's hospitality, the least she could do was earn her keep. She had no idea that across the county, Nathaniel Carmichael was already regretting his hasty decision, or that he would soon come looking for the bride he'd so callously discarded. The frost-covered leaves crunched beneath Elias's knees as something unexpected happened. This rugged farmer, who hadn't knelt before anyone since Martha's funeral, was now on one knee before a stranger. His heart pounded like a blacksmith's hammer against an anvil, surprising even himself with this bold gesture. "Ma'am," he began, his voice rough as tree bark, "I've got a proposition that might sound crazy." The winter wind whipped through the trees, carrying away the last traces of daylight. Amelia's blue eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as the stranger's words hung in the frigid air. She clutched her torn veil closer, mascara-stained tears freezing on her cheeks. "Sir, I don't even know your name." "Elias Grove," he answered, removing his work-worn gloves despite the biting cold. "I own a small farm about 3 miles east of here. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and the roof doesn't leak." A distant wolf howl echoed through the darkening forest, making Amelia jump. Her elaborate silk dress, now heavy with mud and melted snow, offered little protection against the plummeting temperature. She shivered violently, her teeth chattering. "Listen carefully," Elias continued, his dark eyes steady and sincere. "I'm not asking you to be my wife, at least not tonight. But you need shelter, food, and safety. Come home with me until you can figure out your next step." Amelia stared at him, searching his weathered face for any sign of deceit. "Why would you help me? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," he replied, gesturing to her abandoned state. "I know what it feels like to be alone, to have your whole world turned upside down in an instant." The mention of his own pain seemed to catch in his throat. He swallowed hard before continuing. "My Martha passed 2 winters ago. Consumption took her. Since then, my house has been as empty as a church on Monday morning." Amelia's fingers, blue with cold, trembled as she reached for her leather valise. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. "I sold everything in Philadelphia, my parents' house, mother's jewelry, even my piano, to come here and marry Nathaniel." "Then let me offer you what he wouldn't," Elias said, extending his calloused hand. "Respect, shelter, and the chance to catch your breath." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a winter storm approaching fast. Snowflakes began falling more heavily, catching in Amelia's disheveled blonde hair. She looked at his outstretched hand, then back at the darkening woods that suddenly seemed more threatening than ever. "What if I'm just trading one trap for another?" she asked, voicing the fear that gripped her heart. Elias didn't flinch. "Then you're free to leave come morning. I've got a spare room that belonged to my sister. She married a shopkeeper in town last spring. The door has a lock, and only you'll have the key." A branch cracked somewhere in the darkness, making them both turn. The forest was coming alive with nocturnal sounds, owls hooting, small animals scurrying through the underbrush. Amelia realized with growing horror that she'd never survive the night alone out here. I don't even have proper shoes," she admitted, lifting her mud-caked silk slippers. The delicate footwear was already ruined, completely unsuited for the harsh wilderness. Without hesitation, Elias shrugged off his heavy wool coat and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth of his body still clung to the fabric, and she nearly wept at the simple kindness. "My cart's just through those trees," he said, pointing to where his patient horse waited. "Old Chester might not be much to look at, but he's steady and sure-footed, even in the dark." Amelia took a deep breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. Everything her mother had taught her about propriety screamed against accepting help from a strange man. But what choice did she have? Die of exposure to preserve her reputation? "Promise me one thing," she said, finally placing her trembling hand in his. "Name it. Promise you won't pity me. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." A ghost of a smile crossed Elias's face, the first in months. "Deal." But in return, you have to promise not to pity me either. Grief makes fools of us all. With surprising gentleness, he helped her to her feet. Her legs, numb from sitting in the cold, nearly buckled, but his strong arms steadied her. As they made their way through the darkening woods toward his cart, Amelia noticed something odd despite everything. She felt safer with this stranger than she had with Nathaniel. The horse, Chester, nickered softly as they approached. Elias helped Amelia onto the wooden bench, then retrieved a thick blanket from beneath the seat. "Wrap yourself tight," he instructed. "It's a fair piece to my place." As he took up the reins, Amelia couldn't help but ask, "Why were you in these woods so late?" "Checking my trap lines," he answered, clicking his tongue to set Chester in motion. "Winter's coming fast, and pelts fetch a good price in town." The cart lurched forward, wheels creaking against the frozen ground. Amelia clutched the bench with one hand, her valise with the other. Everything she owned in the world was in that small leather case. A few dresses, her mother's Bible, and a silver locket containing her parents' portraits. "I must look a fright," she said suddenly, touching her tangled hair. Elias glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. "You look like someone who's been through hell and lived to tell about it. That's nothing to be ashamed of." His words struck something deep within her. For the first time since Nathaniel had abandoned her, Amelia felt a spark of something besides despair. Perhaps it was hope, or maybe just the will to survive. Either way, she sat a little straighter on that hard wooden bench. As they traveled deeper into the night, the storm finally broke. Snow fell in thick curtains, transforming the forest into a white wonderland. But inside Elias's coat, listening to the steady rhythm of Chester's hooves and the occasional creak of the cart wheels, Amelia felt strangely at peace. What awaited her at this stranger's farm? Would morning bring regret for this impulsive decision? Or had fate, in its mysterious way, led her exactly where she needed to be? The small farmhouse appeared through the swirling snow like a beacon in the darkness. Warm light spilled from its windows, and smoke curled from the stone chimney. To Amelia's city-bred eyes, it looked humble but welcoming, nothing like the grand estate Nathaniel had described in his letters. "Home sweet home," Elias announced, guiding Chester toward a modest barn. "Let me get the horse settled, then we'll get you inside where it's warm." Amelia nodded, her teeth chattering too violently to speak. While Elias unhitched Chester and led him into the barn, she studied her surroundings. The farm was neat and well-maintained, with split rail fences and a vegetable garden now dormant under snow. A water pump stood near the back door, and firewood was stacked precisely against the house's eastern wall. Elias returned quickly, offering his arm. "Careful on the steps. They ice over something fierce." Inside, the warmth hit Amelia like a physical force. She gasped, her frozen limbs tingling painfully as they began to thaw. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Simple furniture, a rocking chair, a small table with 2 chairs, a well-worn sofa spoke of a life lived practically rather than luxuriously. "Sit by the fire," Elias instructed, adding logs to the already blazing hearth. "I'll heat some water for tea." Amelia sank onto the sofa, still wrapped in his coat. Now that she was safe, the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I don't usually cry in front of strangers." Elias paused in filling the kettle. "We're not strangers anymore, miss. Whitmore. Amelia Whitmore." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Though I suppose I'm not much of anything now. No home, no family, no prospects." "You're alive," Elias said firmly, setting the kettle on the stove. "That's something." He disappeared into another room, returning with a thick quilt that looked handmade. The pattern was intricate interlocking rings in shades of blue and green. "This was Martha's wedding quilt," he explained, draping it around Amelia's shoulders. "Made it herself over 3 winters." Amelia touched the fabric reverently. "It's beautiful. Are you sure?" Martha believed in helping folks in need. She'd want you to use it. The kindness in his voice broke something inside Amelia. The tears came faster now, accompanied by great, shuddering sobs. Months of fear, weeks of travel, and the crushing humiliation of Nathaniel's rejection poured out of her in a torrent of grief. Elias didn't try to comfort her with empty words. Instead, he busied himself making tea, giving her the privacy to fall apart. When her sobs finally subsided, he placed a steaming mug in her hands. "Chamomile with honey," he said. Martha swore by it for settling nerves. Amelia sipped gratefully, the sweet warmth spreading through her chest. "You must think me foolish," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Coming all this way for a man I'd never met." Elias settled into the rocking chair across from her. "I think you're brave. Takes courage to leave everything behind and start fresh." "Brave or desperate?" she asked bitterly. "After Father died, the creditors took everything. Mother's health failed soon after. I nursed her until—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Until she passed," Elias completed gently. "I know that road. Walked it myself with Martha." Their eyes met across the small room, two souls recognizing shared pain. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows in their frames. But inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of understanding and connection. "Tell me about her," Amelia said suddenly. "You're Martha." Elias's face softened. "She was a force of nature. Tiny little thing, barely came up to my shoulder, but she could work circles around me in the garden. Had a laugh that could light up the darkest day." As he spoke, Amelia noticed the small touches throughout the room that spoke of a woman's presence: dried flowers in a blue vase, embroidered curtains at the windows, a sampler on the wall that read, "Bless this home." "She made this place beautiful," Amelia observed. "She made everything beautiful," Elias agreed. His voice caught slightly. "Even dying, she found ways to make others smile. Told jokes right up until—" He stood abruptly, turning toward the stove. "You must be hungry. I've got venison stew left from supper." Amelia recognized the deflection but didn't push. Grief, she knew, had its own timeline. "That sounds wonderful," she said instead. As Elias ladled stew into a bowl, thunder cracked overhead. The storm was intensifying, wind driving snow against the windows with increasing fury. Amelia shivered despite the fire's warmth. "Don't worry," Elias said, placing the bowl before her. "This house has weathered worse storms than this. You're safe here." The stew was simple but delicious: chunks of tender meat, potatoes, carrots, and herbs Amelia couldn't identify. She ate ravenously, suddenly aware of how long it had been since her last meal. "I haven't eaten since yesterday," she admitted between bites. "Nathaniel was supposed to meet me at the train station in Millbrook. When he finally arrived—" She set down her spoon, appetite fleeing at the memory. "What happened?" Elias asked quietly. He took one look at me and his face changed, like he'd bitten into a rotten apple. Amelia's hands clenched in her lap. "He said my photograph must have been taken years ago, before I'd let myself go. Said he couldn't present such a substantial bride to his family." Anger flashed across Elias's features. "The man's a fool. He drove me to the crossroads and left me there. Said I could walk back to town or freeze. It made no difference to him." Her voice trembled. "I tried to follow the road, but the snow started and I got turned around, and ended up in my woods," Elias finished. "Seems to me fate had other plans." A particularly violent gust of wind shook the house, making them both jump. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Amelia pulled the quilt tighter around herself. "I should have known better," she said softly. "A wealthy gentleman interested in a penniless woman from Philadelphia? It seemed too good to be true." "Sometimes good things come disguised as disasters," Elias replied. He rose and checked the windows, making sure they were secure against the storm. "My pa used to say that God works in mysterious ways, but he always works." Amelia considered this as she finished her stew. The warmth of the food, combined with the fire's heat and emotional exhaustion, made her eyelids heavy. She stifled a yawn. "You need rest," Elias observed. "Let me show you to Annie's room." He led her down a short hallway to a small bedroom. It was simply furnished with a brass bed, a washstand, and a cedar chest. A colorful rag rug covered the wooden floor, and lace curtains framed the single window. "Annie left some clothes in the chest," Elias said, lighting the oil lamp on the bedside table. "They might be a bit small, but they're clean and warm. Better than that wet silk you're wearing." He showed her where to find extra blankets, pointed out the chamber pot discreetly tucked under the bed, and demonstrated how to work the door lock. "No one will bother you here," he assured her. "You have my word." Left alone, Amelia sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Through the window, she watched snow swirl in the lamplight, creating a hypnotic dance of white against black. Somewhere in that storm, Nathaniel was probably sitting by his own fire, congratulating himself on avoiding a disastrous marriage. But here, in this simple farmhouse with a kind stranger who asked nothing of her, Amelia felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Safety. As she changed into Annie's flannel nightgown and crawled beneath the heavy quilts, she wondered if perhaps Elias was right. Maybe disasters could become blessings in disguise. The storm raged on, but inside her borrowed room, Amelia drifted into the first peaceful sleep she'd had since leaving Philadelphia. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make. But for tonight, she was warm, fed, and protected from both the elements and the cruelty of men like Nathaniel. In the main room, Elias sat by the dying fire, Martha's picture in his hands. "Did I do right?" he whispered to the image. "Bringing her here?" The only answer was the wind's howl and the settling of logs in the fireplace. But somehow, in the depths of his heart, Elias felt Martha's approval. For the first time in 2 years, the house didn't feel quite so empty. The sound of expensive leather boots on wooden steps jolted Amelia awake. It wasn't Elias. She'd grown accustomed to his heavy work boots over the past 3 days. These footsteps were different. Sharp, impatient, and carrying the authority of someone who expected doors to open without knocking. "Open up, Grove," a familiar voice bellowed through the morning air. "I know she's in there." Amelia's blood turned to ice. "Nathaniel." She scrambled out of bed, still wearing Annie's borrowed dress, and peered through the frost-covered window. A gleaming black carriage stood in the yard, its matched pair of horses stamping in the snow. Nathaniel Carmichael himself paced before the front door, his fine wool coat and polished boots a stark contrast to the humble farmyard. In the main room, she heard Elias's calm voice. "Hold your horses, Carmichael. A man's entitled to finish his coffee." The door opened with deliberate slowness. Amelia crept into the hallway, positioning herself where she could see but not be seen. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Nathaniel burst into the house without invitation, his handsome face twisted with indignation. "Where is she? Where's my bride?" "Don't recall you having a bride," Elias replied, setting his coffee cup down with careful precision. "Last I heard, you abandoned a lady at the crossroads in a snowstorm." "That's none of your business." Nathaniel's eyes darted around the room. "Amelia, come out this instant." Something in Amelia snapped. 3 days of safety and kindness had rekindled a fire she thought extinguished. She stepped into the doorway, chin high despite her trembling hands. "I'm not your bride, Nathaniel. You made that quite clear." Nathaniel's gaze swept over her simple dress and flour-dusted apron. She'd been helping Elias bake bread that morning. His lip curled in disgust. "Look at you, playing house with this farmer. Have you no shame?" "Shame?" Amelia's voice rose. "You speak to me of shame? After leaving me to die in the wilderness?" "Don't be dramatic," Nathaniel scoffed. "I knew you'd find your way back to town eventually. It was a test of your resourcefulness." Elias moved between them, his broad shoulders blocking Nathaniel's view of Amelia. Though shorter than the city gentleman, he radiated a quiet strength that made Nathaniel step back. "That's enough. You've said your piece. Now leave." Not without her, Nathaniel insisted. My mother's arriving next week expecting to meet my fiancé. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it would be to explain that she ran off with some backwoods hermit? Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks. So that's what this is about? Your reputation. Our reputation, Nathaniel corrected. Think sensibly, Amelia. I'm offering you a life of comfort, social standing, everything you've lost. What can he give you? Calloused hands and a drafty cabin. Before Elias could respond, Amelia stepped around him. He's given me more kindness in 3 days than you showed in 3 months of letters. He sees me as a person, not a problem to be solved. Nathaniel's perfectly groomed mustache twitched. You're being ridiculous. I admit I handled our first meeting poorly, but surely we can move past that unfortunate incident. Unfortunate incident? Amelia's voice shook with fury. You called me a cow, said I'd misrepresented myself. Well, you did send your sister's photograph, Nathaniel countered smugly. The room fell silent. Elias turned to look at Amelia, his expression unreadable. She felt the blood drain from her face. I can explain, she whispered. Nathaniel seized the moment. Oh, didn't she tell you? The beautiful woman in the photograph she sent wasn't her at all. It was her deceased sister, Eleanor. Quite the deception, wouldn't you agree? Elias remained quiet, his dark eyes studying Amelia's face. She wanted to sink through the floorboards, to disappear entirely. Instead, she forced herself to meet his gaze. It's true, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Eleanor died of scarlet fever last year. She was everything I'm not: slender, graceful, beautiful. When Nathaniel's advertisement specified a woman of pleasing appearance, I sent her picture instead of mine. Because you knew no man would want you otherwise, Nathaniel finished cruelly. Something dangerous flashed in Elias's eyes. He took a step toward Nathaniel, who instinctively backed away. Get out of my house. Now see here, Nathaniel began. Get out. Each word fell like a hammer blow. Before I forget my manners entirely. Nathaniel straightened his coat, attempting to salvage his dignity. Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've thrown away. Amelia. No respectable man will have you now. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the glass, they watched him climb into his carriage and snap the reins, sending the horses into a rapid trot. The silence that followed felt deafening. Amelia couldn't bear to look at Elias. I'll pack my things, she said, turning toward the bedroom. Why? His simple question stopped her in her tracks. Because I lied to you. By omission, but still. Elias sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Sit down, Amelia. We need to talk. She perched on the edge of the sofa, hands twisted in her lap. Elias took his usual chair by the fire, studying her with those penetrating dark eyes. Did you lie about your parents? About losing everything? No, she answered quickly. All of that was true. Did you lie about Nathaniel abandoning you? No. Then what exactly did you lie about? Amelia blinked, confused. The photograph. I deceived Nathaniel by sending Eleanor's picture instead of mine. Seems to me that's between you and him, Elias said. You never showed me any photograph. Never claimed to be anything other than what you are. But, she struggled to find words. Aren't you angry? Disappointed? Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm angry at a man who'd judge a woman's worth by her waistline. Disappointed in a society that makes women feel they need to hide behind their prettier sisters' pictures. But at you, he shook his head. You're the same person who helped me birth a calf at midnight last night, who laughed when the chicken chased you around the yard, who cried over my Martha's quilt. Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks. I was so afraid, she confessed. After Mother died, I had nothing. No money, no prospects, no family. When I saw Nathaniel's advertisement for a mail-order bride, it seemed like my only chance. But I knew. She gestured helplessly at herself. I knew I wasn't what men wanted. Men like Nathaniel, maybe, Elias agreed. But here's something I learned from Martha. Real beauty isn't measured in pounds or inches. It's in how you treat folks who can't do anything for you, how you handle hard times, how you find joy in simple things. He stood and walked to the mantel, taking down a small daguerreotype. This was Martha on our wedding day. Amelia accepted the frame with reverent hands. The woman in the image was plain-featured, with a strong jaw and direct gaze. Not conventionally beautiful, but her smile radiated warmth. She wasn't what you'd call a beauty, Elias continued. Other fellows passed her by for prettier girls. But I saw something they missed, a spirit that could weather any storm, a heart big enough to love even my stubborn self. She was lucky to have you, Amelia said softly. No, Elias corrected. I was lucky to have her, just like some man will be lucky to have you, whether that's here or somewhere else. The weight that had pressed on Amelia's chest since Nathaniel's arrival began to lift. You still want me to stay? That's your choice to make. But you're welcome here as long as you need. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the ticking of the mantel clock. Outside, the morning sun was melting yesterday's snow, creating tiny rivers that ran toward the barn. Elias, Amelia ventured after a while. Thank you for seeing me. He nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. Now, how about we finish that bread? The dough won't knead itself. As they returned to the kitchen, working side by side in companionable silence, Amelia felt something shift inside her. The shame that had haunted her since Eleanor's death began to loosen its grip. In its place grew something tender and unexpected, the first shoots of self-acceptance. Meanwhile, in town, Nathaniel Carmichael sat in the finest room at the Imperial Hotel, penning a telegram to his mother. Slight delay in wedding plans. Bride proved unsuitable. Seeking replacement. He paused, then added, send Catherine's measurements. But back at the farm, neither Elias nor Amelia spared him another thought. They were too busy living, laughing over flower-dusted noses, planning the spring garden, and discovering that sometimes the best journeys end exactly where they're supposed to begin. Rain drummed steadily on the tin roof, creating a soothing rhythm that matched Amelia's heartbeat as she sat darning socks by lamplight. 3 weeks had passed since Nathaniel's dramatic visit, and life on the farm had settled into a comfortable pattern. The late March thaw had turned the yard to mud, but inside the small house, warmth and contentment reigned. Elias entered from the barn, shaking water from his hat. Creeks rising fast might flood the lower pasture by morning. Should we move the sheep? Amelia asked, setting aside her mending. Already done. You're thinking like a farmer now. His smile carried approval and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. They exchanged puzzled glances. Visitors were rare, especially in such weather. Elias opened it to reveal a drenched young man clutching a leather satchel. Telegram for Miss Amelia Whitmore, he announced, water dripping from his cap. Amelia's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. Who would send her a telegram? Everyone she knew thought her lost or didn't care enough to search. Best come in and dry off, Elias told the messenger, but the boy shook his head. Can't stay. More deliveries. He tipped his cap and splashed back to his horse. Amelia stared at the unopened telegram, her mind racing through possibilities. Had someone died? Been injured? Found her somehow? Want me to step out? Elias offered, sensing her hesitation. No, she said quickly. Stay, please. With shaking fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Her eyes widened as she read, then read again. What is it? Elias asked gently. It's from my father's old business partner, Mr. Jameson. He's been looking for me since Mother passed. She looked up, bewildered. He says Father had an insurance policy we didn't know about. Has finally paid out $5,000. He's holding it in trust for me. Elias whistled low. That's a fortune. He wants to know where to send it. Amelia continued, her voice distant. Says I should come to Philadelphia to sign papers. That I could restart my life properly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. $5,000 would buy a house, start a business, secure a comfortable future. It was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. When would you need to leave? Elias asked, his voice carefully neutral. He says to wire him my plans. The money's been waiting 6 months already. She folded the telegram with deliberate care. I could be on tomorrow's train if I wanted. Silence stretched between them, filled only by rain and the pop of burning logs. Elias moved to the window, staring out at the storm-darkened fields. You should go, he said finally. That kind of money, it changes everything. Does it? Amelia stood, crossing to stand beside him. Does it change the fact that I've been happier these past weeks than I ever was in Philadelphia? Does it change how I feel when you smile at me across the breakfast table? Elias turned to face her, hope warring with resignation in his eyes. You deserve better than this hard life. Better than patched clothes and calloused hands. Whose hands rebuilt my faith in human kindness? She challenged. Whose patience taught me to milk a cow and gather eggs without getting pecked? Who sees me, really sees me? Not as too much or too little, but as exactly enough. Amelia, his voice roughened with emotion. I need to tell you something, she interrupted. That first night when you found me in the woods, I wasn't just running from Nathaniel. I was running from myself. From the mirror that showed me everything I thought was wrong with me. She touched his arm. But you gave me a different mirror. One that reflects strength I didn't know I had. Thunder rolled overhead, making the windows rattle. Elias caught her hand, his work-roughened fingers gentle against her skin. If you stay, he said slowly, it can't be out of gratitude or obligation. This life, it's not easy. Crops fail. Animals die. Winter nights get long and lonely. Lonelier with money than with love, she countered. I've had comfortable emptiness. I choose difficult joy. Something broke in his expression then, a wall crumbling, letting light flood spaces long sealed in shadow. I swore I'd never love again after Martha. Thought my heart was buried with her. Hearts don't bury, Amelia whispered. They plant themselves and grow new roots. Lightning illuminated the room, casting their shadows tall against the wall. In that electric moment, Elias cupped her face in his hands. Stay, he said simply. Not for shelter or safety, but because this place becomes home when you're in it. Because I wake up looking forward to hearing your voice. Because somewhere between pulling you from that snowbank and watching you master sourdough bread, I fell in love with you. Tears slipped down Amelia's cheeks. I need to send a telegram. His hands dropped, misunderstanding. Of course. I'll hitch up the wagon dash. To tell Mr. Jameson to donate the money to the Philadelphia Orphans Fund, she finished. In memory of Eleanor Whitmore, who always believed her sister would find where she belonged. Joy transformed Elias's features. You're sure? I've never been more certain of anything. She reached up, tracing the laugh lines around his eyes. Though I do have one condition. Name it. Teach me to plow. If I'm going to be a farmer's wife, I should learn to pull my weight. Wife. The word emerged reverent, hopeful. Unless you had other plans for the woman living in your spare room indefinitely? Instead of answering, Elias pulled her close and kissed her with 3 weeks of pent-up longing. Thunder crashed again, but neither noticed. They were lost in their own storm, one that washed away past hurts and watered new beginnings. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Amelia rested her forehead against his chest. There's something else I should confess. If you're secretly a Russian princess, we might need a bigger house. She swatted his arm playfully. Be serious. Remember that first morning, when I burned the eggs, and the toast, and somehow the coffee. I did it on purpose, she admitted. I was terrified you'd send me away if I seemed too comfortable, too eager to take Martha's place in your kitchen. Elias laughed, the sound rich and full. And here I was, eating charcoal to spare your feelings. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Perfect match, I'd say. He kissed her again, softly this time. Though maybe I should handle breakfast tomorrow. They stood together watching the storm, planning a future neither had dared imagine weeks before. The money in Philadelphia would help orphan children instead of buying empty luxury. The farm would flourish under their combined care. And love, that most mysterious of seeds, would grow strong in soil enriched by honesty and trust. Later that night, Amelia removed Nathaniel's ring, still tucked in her dresser drawer, and placed it on the windowsill. Let the rain wash it clean, she thought. Let it remind her that sometimes rejection redirects us toward redemption. In the flickering lamplight, she penned 2 letters. The first, to Mr. Jameson, explaining her wishes for the insurance money. The second, to Nathaniel's mother. Dear Mrs. Carmichael, your son did me the greatest favor of my life when he abandoned me in the snow. I hope his next bride meets your expectations. I have found something far more valuable than social standing, a man who measures worth by character rather than circumstance. Sincerely, Amelia Whitmore, soon to be Grove. She sealed both letters with wax from Martha's old writing desk, feeling the rightness of using something from Elias's past to secure their future. Tomorrow, she would post them in town, closing one chapter of her life while opening another. The storm passed near midnight, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming under starlight. Amelia stood at her window, watching moonbeams dance on puddles, and whispered a prayer of thanksgiving. For snowstorms and strangers' kindness. For second chances and strong coffee. For love that sees beyond surfaces to the soul beneath. In his own room, Elias held Martha's photograph one last time. Thank you, he murmured, for teaching me to recognize real treasure when it lands in my woods. He placed the picture in a drawer, not hiding it, but making room for new memories alongside cherished old ones. Morning would bring muddy chores and practical challenges. They would face gossip in town, raised eyebrows at church, and the 1,000 daily tests of building a life together. But tonight, in the peaceful aftermath of storm and decision, they slept soundly, 2 hearts no longer alone, 2 souls no longer adrift. Sometimes the greatest journeys end not with grand arrivals, but with quiet recognition of where we've belonged all along. And sometimes what looks like loss becomes the doorway to abundance, not of money or status, but of the only wealth that matters. Love given freely, received fully, and multiplied in the sharing. The strawberries! Amelia's cry pierced the morning air as she burst from the kitchen door, her apron flapping in the warm June breeze. Elias, come quick! 6 months had transformed the once-abandoned bride into a capable farmwoman, her cheeks now sun-kissed and her hands strong from honest work. Elias dropped his hammer mid-swing, abandoning the fence repair to follow her urgent call. What's wrong? He asked, jogging toward the garden where she stood among the berry plants. Nothing's wrong, she laughed, a sound that still made his heart skip. Everything's perfect. Look, the strawberry patch exploded with red jewels, more abundant than any harvest Elias had seen in years. Amelia knelt among the plants, her simple cotton dress spreading around her like flower petals. The morning dew still clung to the berries, making them sparkle in the early sunlight. I've never seen anything like it, Elias marveled, crouching beside her. Martha tried for 3 seasons to get strawberries to grow here, said the soil was too stubborn. Amelia's eyes danced with pride. I added eggshells and coffee grounds like my grandmother taught me, and I sang to them every morning. You sang to the strawberries? Elias couldn't hide his amusement. Don't laugh. Plants respond to kindness, just like people. She plucked a particularly large berry and held it out to him. Taste. Their fingers brushed as he accepted the offering, sending a familiar spark through both of them. The berry burst with sweetness on his tongue, better than any he'd ever tasted. But it was the way Amelia watched him, waiting for his reaction, that truly captured his attention. Incredible, he said softly, and they both knew he wasn't just talking about the fruit. A comfortable silence fell between them as they began harvesting together, filling basket after basket. The rhythmic work had become second nature to them both, their movements synchronized like a long-practiced dance. Overhead, barn swallows swooped and called, while bees hummed lazily among the clover. "We'll need to preserve these," Amelia said, surveying their bounty. "I can make jam, and maybe some strawberry wine for the church social." The mention of the social made Elias tense slightly. Their relationship had become the subject of much speculation in town. Some folks whispered about the propriety of an unmarried woman living with a widower, while others defended their arrangement as purely practical. Amelia noticed his reaction. "Are you worried about what people will say?" "Let them talk," Elias replied, but his jaw tightened. "We know the truth." "Do we?" she asked quietly, her hands stilling among the leaves. The question hung between them like morning mist. Over the past months, their connection had deepened beyond mere friendship or convenience. Shared meals became cherished rituals. Evening conversations stretched long into the night. Small touches lingered longer than necessary. Before Elias could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. They both stood, shading their eyes against the sun to see who was coming down the long dirt road to the farm. "That's Doc Henderson's buggy," Elias said, frowning. "Wonder what brings him out here?" The elderly doctor pulled up near the garden, his face grave beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Elias, Amelia," he greeted them. "I'm afraid I bring troubling news." Amelia's hand found Elias's arm, gripping it tightly. "What's happened?" "It's about Nathaniel Carmichael," the doctor said, climbing down from his buggy with effort. "He's been going around town making accusations. Says you're living in sin, corrupting the morals of our community." Elias's free hand clenched into a fist. "That snake has no right." "There's more," Doc Henderson interrupted. "He's filed a formal complaint with the county clerk. Claims Amelia is still legally his intended, that she's broken their engagement contract by taking up with you." "That's absurd," Amelia exclaimed. "He abandoned me." The doctor nodded sympathetically. "I know, my dear, but he's a smooth talker with powerful friends. Judge Matthews is considering the case." Elias felt Amelia trembling beside him. "What can we do?" he asked. "Well," Doc Henderson said, stroking his beard thoughtfully, "seems to me the simplest solution would be to make your arrangement official. If you were married, Nathaniel would have no legal claim." The suggestion fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples through the morning air. Elias and Amelia looked at each other, really looked, for the first time acknowledging what had been growing between them. "I should check on the bread," Amelia said suddenly, color rising in her cheeks. She hurried toward the house, leaving strawberry baskets scattered in her wake. Doc Henderson patted Elias's shoulder. "Think on it, son, but don't wait too long. Nathaniel's stirring up quite a hornet's nest in town." After the doctor left, Elias found Amelia in the kitchen, furiously kneading dough that didn't need kneading. Flour dusted her arms up to the elbows, and tears tracked through the white powder on her cheeks. "Amelia," he said gently. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. "Your reputation, your peace, your life. I should leave before I cause more trouble." Elias crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, taking her flour-covered hands in his. "Don't you dare," he said fiercely. "This farm was dying before you came. I was dying. You brought life back to both. But people are talking. Let them talk." His voice softened. "Amelia, when I found you in those woods, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me." She looked up at him, hope warring with fear in her blue eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he took a deep breath, "I'm saying that Doc Henderson might be onto something. Not because of Nathaniel or what people think, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside, a meadowlark trilled its afternoon song. Amelia's hands trembled in his grasp. Are you asking me to marry you?" she whispered. "I'm asking if you'd consider it," Elias said carefully. "Not out of obligation or propriety, but because somewhere between that first night and this morning's strawberries, I fell in love with you." Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks, leaving clean tracks through the flower. "Oh, Elias," she breathed. "I've been in love with you since you gave me Martha's quilt." Joy burst through him like spring after a long winter. Without thinking, he pulled her close, not caring about the flower or the dough or anything except the woman in his arms. Their lips met tentatively at first, then with growing certainty, tasting of strawberries and possibility. When they finally parted, both were breathless and grinning like children. "Is that a yes?" Elias asked. "Yes," Amelia laughed. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They spent the rest of the day in a happy daze, making plans between preserving strawberries. Amelia would wear her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in her trunk. They'd marry in the meadow behind the house, where wildflowers bloomed in abundance. The ceremony would be simple but meaningful, with only close friends in attendance. As evening approached, they sat on the porch swing, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Amelia's head rested on Elias's shoulder, his arm secure around her waist. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "People will always remember how we met, how I came to be here." Elias pressed a kiss to her temple. "Let them remember. Our story isn't about how we started, but how we choose to continue." Thunder rumbled in the distance, reminiscent of that first stormy night. But now, instead of fear, it brought only the promise of rain to nourish their flourishing garden. In the fading light, fireflies began their nightly dance, tiny sparks of magic in the gathering dusk. "I have something for you," Elias said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box worn with age. "This was my grandmother's, then Martha's. I'd like you to have it." Inside nestled a simple gold band with a single pearl. Amelia gasped, touching it reverently. "It's beautiful. Try it on," he urged. The ring slipped onto her finger as if made for her. In that moment, surrounded by the fruits of their shared labor and the promise of tomorrow, Amelia understood that true love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect beginnings. It was about choosing each other, day after day, through storms and harvests alike. As the first stars appeared overhead, they sat together on the porch swing, planning their future. Neither noticed Nathaniel's spy watching from the woods, nor could they guess the challenges that still lay ahead. For now, they had each other, and that was enough. Spring sunlight filtered through the budding oak branches, dappling the meadow where Amelia stood in her mother's carefully preserved wedding dress. The ivory silk, though slightly yellowed with age, draped elegantly over her figure. Instead of an elaborate veil, she wore a crown of wildflowers that Elias had gathered that morning, delicate blue forget-me-nots, cheerful yellow buttercups, and tiny white Queen Anne's lace. "You look beautiful," whispered Sarah, Doc Henderson's daughter, who had become Amelia's closest friend in town. She adjusted the flower crown one final time. "Elias won't be able to breathe when he sees you." Through the trees, Amelia could see the small gathering of witnesses: Doc Henderson himself, the Reverend Collins, Annie and her shopkeeper husband, and a handful of neighbors who had stood by them through the controversy of the past weeks. Notably absent were the town gossips and Nathaniel's supporters, but their absence felt more like a blessing than a slight. "It's time," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. As Amelia stepped into the clearing, her eyes found Elias immediately. He stood beneath the same oak tree where he discovered her 6 months ago, wearing his Sunday best, a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and strong frame. His face, usually so controlled, showed naked emotion as she approached. The ceremony was simple, just as they'd planned. Reverend Collins spoke of love born from adversity, of second chances and divine providence. When it came time for the vows, Elias's voice was steady but thick with feeling. "Amelia, when I found you in these woods, I thought I was offering you shelter from a storm. I didn't realize you would become my shelter, my peace, my home." He slipped Martha's grandmother's ring onto her finger. "I promise to cherish you, to stand beside you through whatever storms may come, and to love you with all that I am and all that I have." Amelia's own voice trembled as she spoke. "Elias, I came to this place broken and lost, believing my worth was measured by others' opinions. You showed me that true value lies in the heart, in kindness, in the courage to love again after loss. She placed a simple gold band on his finger. I promise to be your partner in all things, to bring joy to your days and comfort to your nights, and to love you with every breath I take. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, applause erupted from their small audience. Even the birds seemed to join in, filling the air with cheerful song. The morning sun broke through the clouds at that exact moment, bathing the newlyweds in golden light. "Wait!" came a shout from the edge of the clearing. Everyone turned to see Nathaniel Carmichael striding toward them, his face red with anger. Two men Amelia didn't recognize flanked him, rough-looking characters who seemed out of place at a wedding. "This marriage is invalid," Nathaniel declared, waving a document. "I have here a signed contract of engagement between myself and Miss Whitmore. She cannot legally marry another while bound to me." Elias stepped protectively in front of Amelia, his hands clenched. "You forfeited any claim when you abandoned her. The law says otherwise," Nathaniel sneered. "Judge Matthews agrees. These men are here to escort Miss Whitmore back to town for a proper hearing." Amelia felt her happiness crumbling, replaced by the familiar dread she'd felt in those woods months ago. But this time she wasn't alone. She stepped out from behind Elias, her chin high. "You're too late, Nathaniel," she said, her voice carrying across the meadow. "I am no longer Miss Whitmore. I am Mrs. Grove." "The ceremony isn't complete until it's registered," Nathaniel countered. "I can still—" "Actually," interrupted a new voice, "the ceremony was registered yesterday." Everyone turned to see Judge Matthews himself emerging from behind the oak tree, where he'd apparently been observing the entire event. The elderly judge walked with dignified purpose, his silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. "You see, Mr. Carmichael," the judge continued, "when Reverend Collins came to me yesterday with concerns about your intentions, I decided to investigate the matter myself. I found your supposed contract to be fraudulent, forged. In fact, since Miss Whitmore's signature doesn't match any of her other legal documents." Nathaniel's face drained of color. "That's impossible. I have witnesses who have all recanted their statements when faced with the possibility of perjury charges," Judge Matthews said sternly. "Furthermore, I have here a telegram from the Philadelphia police. It seems you're wanted for similar schemes in 3 other states, promising marriage to wealthy women, taking their money, then abandoning them." The two rough men beside Nathaniel began edging away, clearly wanting no part of this turn of events. Nathaniel himself looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting wildly. "You can't prove anything," he blustered. "Can't I?" The judge produced another document. "This is a sworn statement from Miss Charlotte Pembroke of Boston, describing how you swindled her out of her inheritance using the exact same methods. She'll be arriving next week to testify against you." 2 deputies materialized from the crowd, moving to flank Nathaniel. "Nathaniel Carmichael," one announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and theft by deception." As they led him away, Nathaniel shot one last venomous look at Amelia. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "You could have had everything." "I already do," she replied softly, taking Elias's hand. With the drama concluded, the wedding celebration resumed with even greater joy. Sarah had prepared a picnic feast in the meadow, cold chicken, fresh bread, strawberry preserves made from last summer's miraculous harvest, and a simple but beautiful cake decorated with spring flowers. As the afternoon wore on, Amelia found herself watching Elias as he talked and laughed with their guests. He caught her eye and smiled, that special smile reserved only for her. In that moment, she understood completely what he'd meant about their story not being about how they started, but how they chose to continue. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Elias asked, coming to sit beside her on the blanket. "I was just thinking how different this is from the wedding I imagined in Philadelphia," she said. "Grand cathedral, hundreds of guests, imported lace and silk. Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. "That life you might have had." Amelia looked around at the meadow, at their friends enjoying simple pleasures, at the farm visible in the distance, their farm now. "Not for a moment," she said honestly. This is real. This is true. As the sun began to set, their guests gradually departed, leaving the newlyweds alone in the meadow. They walked hand in hand to the oak tree where it all began, its branches now full of spring leaves. I have something to tell you, Amelia said, suddenly shy. Something I've been waiting to share until today. Elias raised an eyebrow. Oh! She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. By Christmas, there will be 3 of us. The joy that lit Elias's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. Are you sure? He asked, wonder in his voice. Doc Henderson confirmed it last week. I wanted to wait until we were married to tell you. They stood together beneath the oak tree, watching the stars emerge one by one. A whippoorwill called in the distance, its lonely song now seeming like a celebration. The same woods that had once witnessed Amelia's abandonment now bore testimony to her triumph. You know what I realized today? Elias said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. When I found you here, I thought you were like a hothouse flower, delicate, pampered, unable to survive in harsh conditions. And now? She asked, leaning back against his chest. Now I know you're a wildflower, resilient, adaptable, able to bloom anywhere if given half a chance. He pressed a kiss to her temple. And much more beautiful for it. They made their way back to the farmhouse, their home, as the full moon rose over the fields. Inside, Elias had prepared a surprise. The main room was transformed with candles and wildflowers, and Martha's quilt was spread before the fireplace. I thought we should start our marriage where our friendship began, he explained. That night, as they lay together for the first time as husband and wife, Amelia reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. She'd left Philadelphia believing her worth was measured in dress sizes and social status. She'd survived abandonment, faced public scrutiny, and overcome legal challenges. Through it all, she'd discovered strength she never knew she possessed. As dawn broke, painting the bedroom in soft pink light, Amelia woke to find Elias watching her with tender eyes. Good morning, Mrs. Grove, he whispered. Good morning, husband, she replied, savoring the word. Outside, the farm was coming to life, roosters crowing, cows lowing for their morning milking, birds singing their dawn chorus. It was all so beautifully ordinary, so perfectly imperfect. Later that morning, as they worked side by side in the garden, Amelia paused to watch a butterfly land on one of her strawberry plants. Its wings opened and closed slowly, revealing intricate patterns that seemed designed by an artist's hand. Look, Elias, she called softly. He joined her, and they watched together as the butterfly took flight, dancing on the breeze before disappearing over the fence. Martha used to say butterflies were proof that beautiful things can come from difficult changes, Elias said. Amelia smiled, thinking of her own transformation, from abandoned bride to beloved wife, from city socialite to capable farmwoman, from broken to whole. Her journey had indeed been a metamorphosis. As they returned to their work, hands in the soil and hearts full of hope, neither could have predicted that their story would become local legend. Years later, people would still tell the tale of the widower who found love in the woods, and the abandoned bride who discovered her true worth. But for now, they were simply Elias and Amelia Grove, 2 people who had found each other in the wilderness of grief and created something beautiful from the ashes of their former lives. Their love, like the wildflowers that grew untamed in their meadow, was resilient, natural, and free. And in the end, that was worth more than all the fancy weddings and social status in the world.